biting opponents.
Oh, jeez.
Okay, yeah, come on now.
Shoving referees.
We cut him. He'll never fight in the UFC ever again.
Putting the promotion in a bad light.
This is the guy, Matt Riddle, who did an interview and said, I smoke marijuana so I don't beat my wife and children.
Felonies.
Tonight, for the first time, we're hearing from the UFC fighter who's accused of roughing up a worker at a downtown Albuquerque club and pulling out a gun.
Steroids.
Because of the narrative that the UFC painted,
What
right?
narrative?
That she's this heel, she's this monster, PEDs, right?
Yeah, but that's because she tested positive.
Once. We don't talk about John Jones. He's tested positive more than once.
I suffer bully, abuse, call me, I'm a man, I have a dick. How is the boss make fun? They are athlete, and who's going to stop him?
Fighting records.
Can we ask about your record? It's been in the news this week that your wins and losses have changed and your record. Do you have any comment on all that situation?
To weird underwear.
And what an unfortunate choice in shorts. That just doesn't look right.
I just want to know why.
And doping suspensions.
It's a hard one to swallow when you get caught cheating, which is, this stuff is, there's no way it's not cheating. I mean, this is just cheating, right? I mean, this isn't any accident. It taints your legacy.
Reaching the UFC is as daunting a task as climbing Mount Everest. However, staying at the top indefinitely is even more challenging.
UFC star John Bones Jones is being suspended and stripped of his championship title.
That comes just hours after the UFC's president flew to Albuquerque to learn more about the felony charges Jones faces in connection with a hit-and-run crash.
One misstep and the avalanche can sweep you into the abyss.
Do you know what the outcome of this is? If I penalize them, you get cut. They're gonna go to fucking federal prison. Federal prison.
And here are more fighters who got suspended and banned from the UFC.
He was either trying to cheat or he has a horrible doctor. You tell me, which one is it? I don't know.
Surprise, surprise! The king is back!
We'll kick things off with Tito Ortiz, whose rocky relationship with Dana White is all well documented.
You had a relationship early on with Tito Ortiz because you managed him.
100%.
So that went from sugar to shit?
It did. It was a lot of behind the scenes stuff with me and him. And Tito's just a really dumb human being. He's not intelligent at all. He's very, very fucking stupid.
In early 2000s, Dana was Tito's manager, and even after Dana became UFC president, the two maintained a wonderful relationship.
Oh, that's going on the net.
Until a playful grappling session on a plane to Japan turned violent. Legend has it that Tito playfully caught Dana in a chokehold and refused to let go despite the fact that Dana was in extreme discomfort. The UFC president used his boxing experience to fight back, and a brawl ensued.
With Tito Ortiz, I think we have a picture of him here. I don't know what his beef is with you.
I actually never told this story publicly before, but we were on a private plane on our way to Japan, and it was the Fertitta brothers, myself, Tito Ortiz, and our matchmaker at the time, Joe Silva. And Tito and I were messing around, and he put me in what's called a neck crank. I was tapping, and he didn't stop. So I just started blasting him in the ribs. And when he let go, just jumped up, and it was a full-blown fist fight in the plane. And the Fertitta brothers had to jump in and break up the fight.
You're like kids that misbehave.
No, it's true. Exactly.
From that point onwards, Ortiz lost all the perks and privileges he enjoyed within the UFC, like private jets, suites, and whatnot. He even got pay cuts, after which the relationship between the two reached its boiling point.
Google Tito Ortiz talking, okay? You know you're fucking stupid, Tito. You know you are. So we'd be coming up to a big fight that was on Saturday. Deals have been done for months. Tito would call and say, I'm not gonna show up unless you pay me another $150,000 or whatever the number was. He would do this on the regular. Tito was always the type of guy that would step over dollars to pick up dimes because he thought he was smart, but he was the complete opposite of smart. He's not a smart guy. He absolutely destroyed a relationship that he could have had for the rest of his life.
In 2007, the two almost had a legit boxing match, but Tito backed out.
He said, we can't do that anymore. I can't give you anything. I said, well, if it's no contract, you can't give me anything, I'm not gonna do it. He's like, well, you gotta do it. I go, I don't have to do it. Any of my other fights, I always fought, and I fought for money. All of a sudden, I'm not gonna get any financial revenue from it, and it didn't make sense to me. I'm a businessman. I wish it would have happened, that way I could actually shut him up, but I'm glad it didn't happen because I probably would have hurt him.
I have never heard in my career of the owner of a company challenging an employee to a fight.
I did not. He challenged me.
You accepted.
Trained for it, I brought in like real guys. I spent serious time really training for this fight, and I was absolutely gonna do it. Tito and I have boxed before. It wouldn't have been the first time Tito and I boxed.
How's it usually go?
Not good for Tito.
What? Get out of here.
He blinked.
He did. He blinked.
Could you have won?
Yeah, I would have won. I absolutely would have won that boxing match. I was gonna him up and make him look stupid.
And a year later, he briefly left the UFC.
I'm done with the UFC. I'm done being taken advantage of. I'm done of being disrespected. I've been in the sport for 11 years. I gave them a third of my life, and they give me no respect. The president, Dana White, is full of himself. His biggest victim is himself. It just shows how arrogant he really is, and he treats fighters really horribly. And the fighters who have a problem here in the United States, those are the ones he takes advantage of.
Only to resign in 2009, fight for 3 more years, and then get the boot.
Me and Tito have we need some serious fucking counseling, okay? We need to act like grown-ups here at some point and sit down and talk to each other. And it's hard for both of us.
I think we got to get past the first little step of Dana saying he don't want no Tito business, and he was quoted on that. And the last time he said that as long as I'm president of the UFC, Tito Ortiz will never fight in the UFC, and we proved him wrong on that one.
Dana later said that Tito and fellow light heavyweight champion Randy Couture were the worst fighters he has ever worked with.
At such a critical time in the development of the UFC, there are probably 2 guys that absolutely tried to destroy the company at that time, and it was Tito Ortiz and Randy Couture. Two of the worst guys to ever fucking deal with.
Randy Couture.
Couture, I don't respect him at all. Not even a little. The only time that Randy Couture is ever a man is when he steps foot in that cage. As soon as his big toe steps out of that cage, he's the furthest thing from it.
A former UFC double champ and Hall of Famer who has had a rocky relationship with Dana for as long as one can remember.
I knew the whole time that he was doing the deal. Even when I was talking to him and he was lying to me, not even to my face, not even on the phone, but through text. There's no more of a man when that cage closes, and there's no less of a man when he steps outside of it.
Their conflict dates back to early 2000s when White convinced the Fertitta brothers to purchase the UFC and appointed himself as president. Couture and White were at odds from the start due to changes in fighter contracts, particularly concerning ancillary rights.
I have no relationship with the UFC, and that's largely because of Dana White. He decided that I was the enemy quite a while ago, actually when they bought the company. We butted heads almost immediately over ancillary rights and contracts. We weren't getting along very well. I think they felt like they were stuck with me.
And things turned sour between the two when Dana refused to do a cross-promotional super fight between Couture and Fedor Emelianenko.
It looked like you were teasing a big fight with Fedor that never really happened.
The one fight I wanted was the Fedor fight. The most rankings had him ranked 1 and me ranked 2. You want to be the best in the world, you got to fight the best in the world. So I told them I want that fight. They were in negotiations with him. The negotiations broke down. M1 Global kind of owned him, and they wanted a co-promotion. The UFC and Zuffa were not willing to do a co-promotion, so it wasn't going to happen. So I said, all right, I'm resigning as your heavyweight champion. I'm going to go find a way to make this fight happen.
In October 2007, Couture decided to cut all ties with the UFC. He left behind scheduled fights, his role as an on-air analyst, and even the UFC Heavyweight Championship, despite making a whopping $250,000 plus a share of pay-per-view revenue for his return fight against Tim Sylvia. He also earned $250,000 in additional bonuses for defeating Gabriel Gonzaga, but he was unhappy with his pay compared to fellow fighter Chuck Liddell.
How did this happen? How did he, because he was on Fox, last month, so how did he sign a deal with Spike? Where did things go wrong?
When that whole thing went down with Randy a few years ago, we weren't on the best of terms. Now, before that happened, Randy Couture was on the Chuck Liddell, Matt Hughes deal. So then he does this stuff, tries to, pull all this bullshit. His lawyer, whom I can't stand, calling our lawyer every day. We want to come back. We want that job again. And we want to work in the UFC and all this stuff. Finally, I fucking said yes, and I give him the Fox deal. He doesn't even finish his contract. He's got one more fight left, and he bails on the contract and goes and does this. I am happy that he went there. I never have to deal with Randy Couture ever again.
When I signed the TV deal with Spike TV to do both scripted and unscripted television, he kind of went off the reservation and kind of banned me and exiled me at that time.
They filed injunctions. They were basically trying to bleed me of money. I ended up spending about $500,000 of my own money trying to find a way to make that fight happen. I didn't have time to spend a year fighting this thing in legal battles and spending money. So I just let it go. If this fight never happens, it never happens. I'm going to come back and fight. That's what brought me back to the UFC and put me in the fight with Brock Lesnar.
Couture eventually returned a year later to face Brock Lesnar and fought in the promotion for the next 3 years, before retiring in 2011. Yet, he failed to bury the hatchet with Dana, as their war of words and legal battles continue to this day.
Well, I can tell you this, Randy Couture comes off as the greatest guy in the world, Captain America. He's the furthest thing from it, and I'm happy to not be in business with him anymore. Now I don't ever have to be in business with him ever again.
Do you ever want to fight Dana White?
There might be the one guy I have a little animosity towards.
Have you been treated the way you should be treated in this sport?
By the UFC, by the promotion I fought for most of my career, I would have to say no.
Why?
Because it's personal with Dana.
Paul Daley. He was one of Britain's brightest stars when he signed with the UFC, but his promotional stint only lasted 3 fights, with the final one being against Josh Koscheck in a welterweight title eliminator at UFC 113. referee.
We had an incident with a guy named Paul Daley who hit somebody after the fight was over. We cut him. He'll never fight in the UFC ever again.
The winner was slated for a shot at George St. Pierre, so you guys can imagine how important it would have been for Daley. However, the Brits' aspirations were swiftly dashed as the blanket controlled Semtex throughout their fight to earn a landslide unanimous decision victory. But that's not the fun part. As the third and final round ended, Daley's frustration boiled over as he charged at Koscheck and unleashed a sucker punch that had Dan Miragliotta jumping in to defuse what could have been a chaotic ending.
Oh! Daley punches Koscheck at the end of the fight, and look at Dan Miragliotta. Oh! Wow.
Oh, are you kidding me? You're professional. Come on.
That was terrible. That's not what this sport is all about.
He's going to get suspended for that.
Absolutely, as he should.
I mean, that was the best shot he landed in the whole fight.
The UFC brass was furious, and they fired Daley as well as banning him for life.
He'll never come back here again.
We're talking Paul Daley.
Yeah.
You're cutting him from the UFC.
Yeah. He'll never come back. There's no excuse for that. It was probably one of the dumbest things I've ever seen, and he's done. I don't care if he fights in every show all over the world and becomes the best, and everybody thinks he's the pound-for-pound best in the world. He will never fight in the UFC ever again.
Which the Brit thinks was a bit harsh, and maybe it was, considering the number of chances Rousimar Palhares got despite his dirty tricks inside the octagon.
They kicked him out of the UFC, the first guy ever to get kicked out of the UFC for holding on to submission. He definitely holds too long.
To facing a 3-month suspension at UFC 1-on-1 against Thomas Duval for holding a heel hook even after the referee stopped the fight.
He's got it. Tap, 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 tap.
He didn't let go. Watch him crank this thing, and he's tapping, and he's still not letting go, and he's still not letting go. I mean, look how much longer he yanked on it. 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh man.
He resumed his dirty tactics again against Mike Pierce in 2013. In just 31 seconds, the Brazilian caught his opponent in a heel hook, which had Pierce tapping both physically and verbally. But Palhares wouldn't let go. He had to be forced to let go of the submission hold by the referee.
Palhares has a collection of legs back home and he's out! And how about that? Mike Pierce hits the mat, he's already tapping. A completely different level.
The matter was investigated by the powers that be, and after lengthy consideration, the Brazilian was found guilty of being a piece of crap and was ultimately fired by the UFC.
Last night, there was kind of an ugly incident. Rousimar Palhares, he had his opponent in an ankle lock. His opponent tapped out, and Palhares wouldn't let go.
This is the second incident we've had with Palhares where he had the lock and he didn't let it go. Finally, he let it go, but I'm going to cut him too.
He's done.
He's done.
Despite getting kicked out of the world's top MMA promotion, Palhares continued his villainous ways at the World Series of Fighting, where he poked Jake Shields' eyeballs out.
Going to be back in at least the half guard.
Watch the fingers, man.
And Jake Shields is not happy. Putting his chin in. Look at this.
You're using your fingers, man. Okay? You can't do this.
Before holding on to submission for longer than needed.
He rolls out the Kimura, but this is it. It's all over. And once again, Palhares maintains the hold. Clearly the tap was coming in the corner of Jake Shields. They are furious.
Really nice. He kept
Gets the arm. There's the tap. There's the tap. Mazzagati's trying to get him off.
He's just punishing that guy. You know, he makes it scarier for other people, and he's probably used to doing it.
Now, Caro Parisian's UFC ban was well deserved.
Well, and there's a lot to overcome. I mean, the painkiller addiction is.
Thanks.
No, I'm just saying.
You put me on the spot a couple times. I was never addicted. I abused it, and it hurt me without knowing. Do you understand?
Parisian was removed from the UFC promotion due to a series of incidents.
Caro Parisian has a lot of problems, mentally, physically, emotionally, and he's got more problems than I could even talk about or care to talk about. He needs to get his personal life fixed and taken care of before he ever thinks about fighting again.
Including pulling out of fights at the last minute and failing drug tests.
Again, first and foremost, I'd like to apologize to Dana White, Lorenzo Fertitta, Frank Fertitta, and Joe Silva for what's been going on the last few months. You know, anxiety and panic attacks took my life, and it kind of like put me down and kind of crushed me in the last year. It comes to a point where, you know, you get drained, you get burned out, and I think that's one of the roles that played, you know, in what's been going on.
One notable instance was when he backed out of a fight against Dustin Hazlett at UFC 106 just before the weigh-in, citing a laundry list of excuses. This was not the first time Parisian had withdrawn from a fight on short notice.
Tore my hamstring where I was supposed to fight Matthews for a title. That kind of lead me off a little bit on the side, and then when I had my medication, you know, and I abused it here and there, and I think that played a role also. But my anxiety and panic attacks were the major roles that really hurt me.
And it didn't sit well with the UFC, especially given the fact that his most recent win over Don Young Kim at UFC 94 had been overturned just a year ago, after he tested positive for multiple prescription strength painkillers in post-fight drug testing.
And the commission, I mean, they did their job and they suspended me for 9 months and gave me a $32,000 fine, which was honestly unheard of. You know, I took a medication drug where I had a prescription for, and I even gave them the prescription and everything else, but they didn't see it that way. They saw it as I was supposed to let them know the day of the weigh-ins, because you get a piece of paper kind of recapping what I've been doing the last month. And I never wrote on the piece of paper because I never needed the medication until the morning of the fight. Long story short, you know, I had pain and I took it and it backfired on me.
Though banned for life, the UFC gave Caro one last chance to redeem himself at UFC 123. But after he failed to secure a victory, it was all over for the Armenian American.
You know, I want to sit here acting like a goof and patting myself on the back, but I've done a lot of things for him. And this was, you know, he's texting me and calling me, and, you know, I said, all right, I'll give this guy one more chance, you know, and Parisian is going to have to pull himself together and get his life together, you know. Caro came in tonight and proved that he can't compete at this level anymore.
What does the future look like in the UFC?
Not good.
I just said you're not saying he's gone yet. You're just saying
I just said he needs to go find out what the next chapter of his life is.
Now, who doesn't remember the infamous Nashville brawl and Jason Miller's role in it? The controversial MMA fighter made headlines after causing a brawl with the Diaz brothers in 2010, following Strikeforce Nashville by crashing Jake Shields' post-fight interview.
What's up? Where's my rematch, buddy? Shields' team, unhappy about the confrontation, took matters into their own hands during the emotional time.
Wow. Yeah, this is ridiculous. This is ridiculous. Not what the? This is my only concern. Yeah. My God.
I just wanted to ask for a rematch. I wasn't trying to get in a big brawl.
After a year-long break, Miller joined the UFC as a coach on The Ultimate Fighter Season 14, opposite Michael Bisping, who beat Miller in their first at the finale. Despite the loss, Miller got another chance at UFC 146 against CB Dollaway.
You have said that if you don't beat CB Dollaway, that you would stop fighting. Is that true?
Yeah. I mean, I'm not fighting in the UFC, and I'm not losing to this guy. So it's a moot point.
However, Miller's pre-fight statement about retirement backfired as Dollaway lost. Miller won, but Dana still sent him packing, because the UFC president firmly believes that when a fighter ponders retirement, he should go for it.
When you get embarrassed the way that you did against Michael Bisping, and then you show up at the next fight with pink, fucking whatever that thing was on and all that other shit. Come on, man. You know, take this thing serious. You want to be a clown, you can do that later. Do that on your reality show. Then something happened here backstage after Mayhem's done. He's gone.
What happened? Can you share it all?
Just some bullshit that I don't want to talk about. It doesn't matter. He's done. He's not with us anymore.
Jon Jones, one of the most celebrated but controversial fighters in UFC history, who has faced several suspensions due to failing drug tests and legal issues. Jones was doing pretty well as an MMA fighter, until a hit and run in 2015 turned his career upside down.
But I was very disappointed with you with that car accident thing.
Yeah.
When you ran away from that car accident.
Yeah.
That to me was like, God damn, John's in a bad place.
Yeah, I was in a bad place. It was a messed up situation, man. I was smoking pot, you know, drinking, you know, every weekend pretty much, you know, to the point of blacking out. Just
blacking out.
Yeah, just being hammered, you know. That morning I got in a car accident, man. It was a huge reality check, and it was, you know, I think in some people's mind they envision me, you know, hitting this car and running up and seeing that it was a pregnant lady and then taking off running. And then people said that I came back and grabbed a load of money, which is the stupidest thing ever. Why would a millionaire need to grab cash? I went through a green light that said that I could turn left, but you're supposed to yield for the right of way, right? Turn left, and person came through, and I just assumed it was my green light to go.
Okay, so you had a green light. Were you at a dead stop from a red to a green, or were you already? You were going. Okay. So did he just turn and hit you? True honor, dude. I wonder if this is that fighter's car. Jon Jones? We'll need that, because then this way we can write a warrant for him. Yep. Shitload of condoms. Yeah, and then they can throw MMA. The caller's advising that the weapons are all locked in the safe. Well, he's fucked. Yep. Yeah, they said he came back and grabbed wads of cash. Oh, did he really? Mm-hmm.
I step out of the car, and I realize, like seconds later, my bull's in the car. So
your bowl,
my
weed.
bowl, my
right.
pot bowl.
Pot.
Yeah, and I wasn't smoking weed in the car or anything like that.
But it was in the car.
But my bowl that had residue was in the car. So I opened my car door. I'd like take 2 steps away from the car, and then I go back to the car, and I like searched the car because I had it in my cup holder. And when I hit, the bowl fell somewhere. Who knows where it flew to? But I knew shit. Like if I can't find that bowl, that's gonna get me in trouble just having a bowl in my car.
As a result, he faced legal consequences, suspension, and was stripped of his belt.
UFC star John Bones Jones is being suspended and stripped of his championship title.
That comes just hours after the UFC's president flew to Albuquerque to learn more about the felony charges Jones faces in connection with a hit-and-run crash.
Obviously, it's never a good thing when you hear that your guys are in trouble. We just found out what the facts are, and now we fly home and figure out what's next.
But late tonight, White's company dropped a bombshell. Effective immediately, Jones is stripped of his light heavyweight title and is suspended indefinitely. But it's anyone's guess when fans will see him in the octagon once again.
Jones tested positive for cocaine in December. A month later, the UFC fined him $25,000 for violating its code of conduct policy and apologized for letting people down.
When he returned a year later to fight for the undisputed light heavyweight title in 2016, things went from bad to worse for the New York native when he tested positive for benzoyl-ergotamine, a metabolite of cocaine. While not banned out of competition, Jones entered rehab.
John Jones released a statement that he's entering a drug treatment facility program on the heels of a failed drug test that was administered on December 4th. He, of course, failed that drug test when metabolites of cocaine showed up, and it was administered by the Nevada State Athletic Commission.
A few months later, Jones was expected to battle then-champion Daniel Cormier for the second time in their careers at UFC 200, but he was pulled from the bout and suspended for a year after failing a drug test for clomiphene and letrozole, both of which are banned substances.
Basically,
what did you take?
So I took an off-brand Cialis pill.
Off-brand?
It wasn't actual Cialis, but it was described to me as being a Cialis, and so I thought it was a Cialis, and I just took it. And I thought everything was fine and dandy. I had no clue that I was now having something else in me that was illegal. I took the Cialis pill on June the 14th, June 16th. USADA came over to my house 6 o'clock in the morning. Hey, what's up, guys? Got coffee going, offering everybody water bottles. Super nice, hospitable, come in. Laughing and joking with them. I had no clue that test was going to be the test that derailed my life. And, right before UFC 200, my manager, Malky, calls me over to his hotel room, and he's like, hey, I want to talk to you, man. I'm like, what's going on? He's like, hey, you're not going to be fighting. I was like, what are you talking about? He's like, you didn't pass your drug test. And the level of hurt and confusion, and I literally had an anxiety attack, and I had never had one of those before.
What did that feel like?
I felt like the whole room just came in on me. Like the whole room came down on me. I had done so much to get back to fighting at UFC 200, like getting my life in order, getting the people around me in order, getting my health, my mind. But the only thing that I did was I took a pill that I thought was gonna give me a boner. And literally, it's caused me a lot of heartache and a lot of disappointment and a lot of...
In 2017, Jones made a successful return to the octagon when he stopped Daniel Cormier to reclaim his belt at UFC 214. But a few days later, he tested positive for turinabol and faced another 15-month suspension.
John Jones, who just won the light heavyweight title belt from Daniel Cormier at UFC 214, potentially has that title belt in jeopardy. Dana White has told our MMA reporter, Brett Okamoto, that Jones failed a drug test.
Well, is he offering up any possible scenario for what happened?
No, he tweeted out like, this is when I find out who my real friends are. Hashtag blast.
Oh boy.
Fuck that noise.
That sounds like you're feeling sorry for
Jesus
yourself.
ain't helping you out of this one.
And I'm glad you're here, DC, because John Jones tested positive for turinabol from a sample the day before your guys' fight, of course, at UFC 214 against you, right?
Yeah.
This is the third time he did it. 3 fights involving your name, he tested positive for something. The California State Athletic Commission has overturned the bout to a no contest due to the failed test.
You don't cheat the sport. You don't cheat the fans. You don't cheat me. You have all the physical advantages, sir. You're 30 years old. You're 6'4". You've got 85-inch reach. I'm 38 years old.
And tested positive for turinabol in a pre-fight test before his light heavyweight title fight with Alexander Gustafsson at UFC 232.
I've heard you say, and I've heard Jeff Nowitzki say, I heard Andy Foster say that you guys are 100% sure that this is not a new ingestion, that he didn't re-ingest anything. The question I don't seem to find the answer to is, how do you know that?
Because that's what the experts are saying. The experts are telling us That's what they do. How else would I know? The experts are telling us.
And I don't expect you to know, but who are the experts?
Ask Nowitzki. Call Nowitzki and set up an appointment to have an interview with him. He'll tell you.
Ariel, I can help you with that.
You know, you probably can't, actually. You let Nowitzki answer that question for you.
I would love to.
Nowitzki's the expert on that. John Jones is calling it a pictogram, for Christ's sakes, okay?
Unfortunately, he's not
I don't think he can answer that question, so talk to Nowitzki.
Jones was cleared to fight after subsequent tests showed no evidence of re-administering the banned substance. However, the event's location was shifted from Las Vegas to Los Angeles.
Hey, what do you think of this John Jones shit that's going on? Do you know what's happened? The UFC's moving from Vegas.
I saw this last night when I got home from the comedy store. Break it down for me.
I talked to Cormier on the phone. He was like, he tested positive again. Can you believe this shit? And they're going to let him fight. I found out about it from Cormier. Cormier told him, they're going to move the fight to LA. I go, no. He goes, yes, Joe. They're moving the fight to LA. I'm like, no, this can't be real. So Andy Foster has said, again, through this transcription of this interview that he did with Ariel Helwani, that it's the same metabolite for the same substance that he tested positive for. That this is the same instance, that the number of it, and it indicates that this is something he's already been punished for. Here's the question, though. Have other people been still punished for the exact same crime? I get how everybody would be fucking pissed. I get how everybody would think that he's a cheater, he's cheating again. I get that you would think that. But I don't know if that's true. And if it's not true, it would be a shame to accuse him of it. If it is the same stuff that was in his system that was ruled to be from a tainted supplement.
Now, while Jones has spent nearly half a dozen years on the sidelines due to suspensions, not all legends have the patience to sit around and waste their years, and Mirko Crocop is one of them. The Croatian entered the UFC late in his career, fighting 10 times in the promotion in 3 stints, with the third one ending in an unfortunate way. It was the year 2015 when Crocop had made a successful return to the UFC, avenging his KO loss to Gabriel Gonzaga in 2007, but a few weeks after his win, he was handed a 2-year suspension for failing a drug test, which Crocop claimed was due to a growth hormone he took for a shoulder injury. Instead of sitting around and waiting for the UFC, Crocop requested the promotion to terminate his contract, allowing him to compete in the Risen Fighting Federation's openweight tournament.
Once this news came out, a lot of people said, oh, how can Mirko Crocop fight because of the USADA thing, even though it happened in 2015, it was a 2-year suspension, and you have fought since then, but for some reason, I think because it's Bellator, people are getting all up in arms about it. Is there anything that you want to say about some of the critics who say that maybe you shouldn't be fighting on this card?
Why not? Why shouldn't I fight on this card? I was suspended for 2 years for nothing, for a negative test result. And so many fighters were positive, taking steroids, anabolical, all kinds of things, and they get suspension of 6 months or 1 year. They gave me 2 years for nothing. You know why? Because I was the first one. Right after UFC signed with USADA, they were just waiting for one big name to launch their program.
That was the last time we saw Crocop in the UFC. Next up is the controversial Renato Sobral. In August 2007, the UFC released a veteran light heavyweight from his contract after he choked out David Heath unconscious, despite Heath tapping out and the referee's attempts to stop him.
Deep. It's deep. Over. Very nice. Babalu has beaten David Heath. Whoa, Babalu did not let go and put David Heath to sleep, even after David Heath tapped.
Dana White announced the decision during a conference call to promote UFC 75. White stated that while Sobral was a fan favorite, his actions were unacceptable and would have resulted in a permanent ban if he had injured Heath. The Nevada State Athletic Commission also took action, withholding half of Sobral's purse, pending a review. Sobral later attempted to distance himself from his comments, suggesting Heath deserved the punishment, which was the final nail in his coffin.
He purposely punished David Heath and put him to sleep. David Heath taps, and Babalu, seeing this, he squeezes anyway, won't let go, and puts him to sleep.
I did what I did because he called me motherfucker.
So what you're saying is that you put him to sleep on purpose even though you knew that he tapped?
Yes, he has to learn respect. All right, he deserved that shit.
Nate Marquardt was let go by the UFC for failing his medical examinations.
So he tested positive for steroids before, and then this.
He tested positive before. Then apparently he was on suspension with New Jersey because his levels were high. Then he comes into Philly and doesn't pass his medicals. Now you tell me, is that 4th chance or is that a 2nd chance? Sounds like a 4th chance to me.
Dana White made the announcement during the weigh-ins for a 2011 event in which Marquardt was supposed to battle Rick Story.
I'm sure you heard that Nate Marquardt is out. It's true. He failed his medicals. Not only is he out of this fight and out of the main event on Person, he will no longer be with the UFC.
the UFC president revealed that not only couldn't Marquardt compete in the scheduled fight, but he was also being released from his contract with the UFC.
Are you saying that Nate's done? I mean, there's nothing he can do to get back.
Nate's done. I'm done with Nate.
Dana, are you?
Listen, Nate's a really nice guy. He's a real sweet, nice, humble guy, but the facts are the facts, and it is what it is. It's easier to go after a guy like Josh Barnett, you know what I mean? He's just callous and rude, and he's a dick, you know? So when he does it, it's easier to just go, you know what? Fuck Josh Barnett.
With Dana saying that Nate was never going to make it back.
Went through everything that he did and said that essentially that he wasn't trying to cheat. This is a medical condition that he's been dealing with. So I was wondering if, based on what he said in his explanation, if maybe you would think twice about, giving him another shot in the UFC.
No, I would not. Do I think he was trying to cheat? Well, let's put it this way. He was either trying to cheat or he has a horrible doctor. You tell me, which one is it? I don't know.
But the ban only lasted a couple of years. Marquardt returned to the promotion in 2013 and competed for 4 more years before eventually retiring from the sport.
Is there anything that we did not touch on that you would like to clear up?
I want to apologize to the fans. I feel like I let them down. I feel like I let my family down. I upset the UFC, my sponsors. I feel so bad for everyone. I hope they can forgive me.
Josh Barnett, who may think was treated unfairly.
I don't really have any doubts that my UFC run here is going to have any Dana White, Josh Barnett, cataclysmic battles.
I'm not a big Josh Barnett fan. I think he's bad for the sport. All the shit that comes out of his mouth is stupid, and I'm not a fan.
Is that the main reason we're not going to see Josh Barnett ever in the UFC?
You'll never see him in the UFC, ever.
Dana White, truly, as far as aspect of fighting is concerned, he's a hindrance. He's unnecessary. I don't know. I think we could definitely get a trained monkey to get in there and do his job.
In late 2016, Barnett tested positive for the presence of Ostrin, a banned substance, in an out-of-competition drug test conducted by USADA.
Speaking of butt fucking, let's talk about USADA.
Yeah. Without the lube.
You tested positive from a tainted supplement. You were cleared, but this whole process was a goat rope. You didn't feel like you were fairly treated.
Not in the least. I took a supplement that had tribulus in it. That's all it was.
It's a Chinese herb that stimulates testosterone, barely works.
The supplement itself, as it turns out, was contaminated with a SARM called Ostarine. The people that did the lab testing on it said, well, clearly just contamination because this wouldn't help you. This wouldn't do anything for you.
Though he maintained his innocence and claimed that he was a victim of a contaminated supplement.
USADA was testing me. I had a fight against Arlovsky, and then after that I was like, I'm just going to take a break for a while. I'm not fighting. I'm going to tour Europe and goof off. UFC, we told them, but USADA would still come around and test, and it's like, okay, fine, whatever.
So you have to give them a detailed itinerary of every day?
Every day.
Okay.
They sent someone to my house. I was like, fuck, all right.
So they still counted that as you not being there for a test?
Yes.
Well, that doesn't make any fucking sense. And they give you a strike?
Yes. And so I'm like, okay, that's aggravating. Then they come back and they're like, oh, you tested positive for this. I'm like, well, that ain't fucking possible. So then I send in some supplements, which I had to pay for to have them tested. They run them through the testing, and then bang, they find it. Then they went out and bought a brand new bottle, unopened, same lot, tested that one, verified the results. Same
positive.
thing. Then they got real quiet. What happens is you're effectively suspended until this thing is all finished out.
What do you mean? Like you would contact them, they wouldn't respond?
They would take them a week, 2 weeks. I tried to corner Travis Brown because I was training him, and they wouldn't let me. They're like, you're suspended, so you can't corner.
But you said you're not suspended.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not taking a punishment for contamination. That's not acceptable because nobody is doping. Nobody's trying to cheat the system. By punishing me, you're trying to levy guilt on me.
Barnett faced a potential 4-year suspension. After arbitration with USADA, however, Barnett was eventually exonerated and received only a public warning.
How did it ultimately get resolved?
Well, ultimately, what ended up happening is we had to go to arbitration.
What do you think their motivation is here?
I think that the way USADA looks at it, the more people they ding, the more effective they appear. They wanted to levy a punishment against me and suspend me for years.
So USADA ultimately, even though they knew that you took a tainted supplement that had no effect whatsoever on your performance, they still wanted to punish you for 2 years. That seems stupid. So at the end of the day, after all this, they say they gave you a reprimand. What does that mean?
That just means like,
don't do that.
Be careful.
But no punishment.
Right. And
so all that 2-year shit from USADA was unwarranted.
Right. And
heavy-handed.
Heavy-handed as hell.
Do you remember when Nick Diaz was being interviewed by all these people, and there was that mean lady who works the Nevada State Athletic Commission, and she was grilling him, and I'm like, we're talking about pot here, you crazy lady. Like, what in the fuck are you doing? You're acting like like he robbed a bank.
Most guys in Barnett's situation would have continued to compete in the UFC, but Barnett asked the UFC to release him since he no longer wanted to compete under USADA's watch. Now, the reason why the UFC wasn't willing to convince Barnett into changing his mind was that it wasn't the first time he had issues with drugs.
You've taken some stuff, right?
I tested positive for anabolics in the past. Well,
Right.
but I mean, the supplement market used to be way wilder than it used to be.
Fighting was way wilder.
Fighting was way wilder. The supplement industry was way wilder. It's like back in 02, you could still buy all this shit over the counter that by 04 got reclassified as steroids.
Josh Barnett tested positive for 3 times, and this guy denies it every time. Everybody's a liar but him. I just saw an interview that he did the other day where he said he could really give a shit about anybody else but himself. You know, this isn't the kind of guy that I respect or want to do business with.
Dana, I'd asked about you, in fact, about what he thought about you passing any drug tests and if you'd be fighting in the UFC again. He basically said, we're not going to pass the test, and that's why you're not ever going to be back in the UFC. Do you have any response to those comments?
Yeah, I'll pass every test. I've already passed tests since then. I've passed tests before then. You know, if he wants, I can come pee in his mouth and he can tell me if he can taste any dianabol on it or anything like that.
That's just too far, Josh.
Oh, I don't know. He might swing that way. You never know.
In 2002, he beat Randy Couture to win the UFC heavyweight title, only to be stripped because of a failed drug test.
You know, Dana White's stature has changed quite a bit over the years from a boxer-size instructor. I don't think it's all been all the Doritos eating, beer drinking, and pretending to be a fighter that's put so much weight on him either. I'd be interested to see Dana White pass some drug tests. His hairline is quite receded, isn't it? Yeah, his shoulders got quite a bit bigger, kind of wider, prone to angry outbursts. Huh.
Tom Lollar was probably just as unlucky as Josh Barnett, as he was released by the UFC despite his USADA suspension nearly being over.
I was with the UFC for a long time. As you mentioned, I had some difficult news. I was let go 1 week ago today. Pretty interesting, shocking news, to me at least. So.
You had a fight, didn't go your way against Corey Anderson, and then there was a USADA suspension, something you have adamantly challenged. I believe they found Ostarine in your system. You were set to be off suspension in October 10th of this year, so less than 2 months, and all of a sudden they just released you.
Lollar had been serving a 2-year suspension from UFC competition due to a failed drug test for Ostarine in 2016, following which he had requested the UFC to release him.
I was shocked. I was kind of distraught because I had asked previously for my release when I was given the USADA suspension. And believe me, Luke, when I tell you this, I did not intentionally ingest any sort of Ostarine or any performance-enhancing drug. Those of you who have read the Josh Barnett situation can kind of understand that not everything is fair when it comes to USADA and the UFC. It took me way off guard.
Lawler's requests were declined for nearly 2 years, but just before the expiration of his suspension, the UFC shockingly released him.
What is your guess about why they waited until now?
I think it's just a combination of them getting rid of guys and my age and not having fought in a few years. I spent many sleepless nights. I spent nights just sitting in the backyard, staring into space, wondering how the hell this happened to me. And to be honest, the past 2 years, while I haven't been able to fight, it's been miserable for me. It's been hell. It sucks.
Next on our list is Michael Graves, who was set to fight Sergio Moraes on the historic 100th episode of UFC Fight Night in 2016, where he effed up big time. Just weeks before his fight, Graves was arrested on a misdemeanor battery charge, resulting in his fight being cancelled and the UFC firing him, even though he was a highly touted prospect with 6 wins out of 7, with 1 draw. What a waste of talent. Ricardo Abreu, the Ultimate Fighter Brazil 3 veteran, was handed a 2-year suspension by USADA after failing an out-of-competition drug test in the summer of 2016. The test revealed the presence of 19 norandosterone and 19 norethiocholinone, both metabolites of banned anabolic steroids. But that wasn't it. Just a year into his suspension, Abreu failed another drug test and was slapped with another 2-year suspension, meaning that he was ineligible to fight for 4 years, starting from the date of his first suspension. The 2 bans forced Abreu into early retirement.
First of all, I want to announce my retirement through all that happened those last few days. 1.5 years ago, about 2 years ago, I started getting sick, getting depressed. It was starting being very hard to train and perform my job. I did it what I had to do. I don't regret on that because I didn't want to live life. I want to be happy. I want to be here for my family. I got a penalty for 2 years, and right after they come test me again. The test was last year, by the way. The results come out right now. And of course, the substance is still in my body. There's nothing I can do about that. Is have a lifetime in my body. I'm announcing my retirement from now, so I can live my life with my full potential, treat myself properly, and be a happy person. That's the way I am.
From one Brazilian to another, Michel Prazeres was banned for 4 years after 4 separate urine samples tested positive for banned substances. These substances included clomiphene and its metabolites, oxandrolone metabolites, and exogenously administered testosterone. These positive results occurred in out-of-competition tests conducted between August 27 and November the 2nd in 2021. Initially, Prazeres contemplated retiring from MMA. Prazeres attributed the positive test to fertility treatment as his wife was experiencing difficulties conceiving. Chris Cyborg was another victim of Dana White's ruthlessness.
Let's talk about the Cyborg situation.
I knew you were going to go there. As soon as I said that, oh, he's going to bring up Cyborg.
Well, they fucked up, and they really fucked up.
They
when
mean
they tried.
Cyborg's team.
Cyborg's team. Whoever did it, whether it's her boyfriend
For sure,
or whoever
boyfriend.
it was that edited that video, that lied and put words in his mouth, is so fucking stupid.
But you say I'm free, I'm not free. I'm never gonna say that. We're gonna die. Okay. I don't want to fight, but you know I want to fight.
But I don't know if you know. I don't know if you know. We'll get it done. Okay. And listen,
To say that whenever I'm talking in public, I'm not telling the truth, which is not what he said at all. And then they have it edit and cut right there.
Well, you think he would say that in a public forum to Cyborg when they're face to face like that? And you don't think you realize there's cameras around?
I'm going to release her from her contract. I will not match any offers. She is free and clear to go to Bellator or any of these other organizations and fight these easy fights that she wants. Done. Done deal. We're out of the Cyborg business.
Widely regarded as one of the greatest female fighters of all time, Cyborg competed 7 times in the UFC, winning the featherweight belt with 2 title defenses.
Because of the narrative that the UFC painted,
What
right?
narrative?
That she's this heel, she's this monster, PEDs, right?
Yeah, but that's because she tested positive.
Once. We don't talk about John Jones. He's tested positive more than once.
Where does this beef come from between Chris Cyborg and Dana White?
The issue really started around 6 or so years ago. That's when the UFC decided to open up its own women's division. They brought in Ronda Rousey. She was the face of it all. There was this large demand to have them fight each other. And finally, after a couple years of the fans asking for this fight, the UFC struck a deal with Chris Cyborg. However, they wanted her to come down from 145 to 135. The Chris Cyborg team didn't think that the UFC was setting her up for success by making her go down to 135. And of course, things have been said by both Ronda Rousey and Dana White that have clearly hurt Chris Cyborg's feelings. Yeah. Dana White spoke about how she looked in a dress at an award show, and she has resurfaced this video as of late and has talked about how it has led to bullying for her daughter, online bullying. Her mother back home has had to deal with things as well. She feels like people have attacked her because of these comments and comments that other people have said about her in the public eye.
In August 2019, Dana White announced that Chris Cyborg would not be returning to the UFC, as he would not be offering her a new contract, and that she was free to sign with another promotion. The decision came after Cyborg accused White of bullying her and damaging her brand.
You look UFC, who's the face UFC? Dana White. He continued to damage my brand a long time ago,
by saying that she was scared of Amanda Nunes.
Cyborg likes to play that she's this really nice person and she's being bullied and all this other bullshit. But I don't think she's afraid to fight Amanda Nunes. She doesn't want to lose again. If I'm lying, she can call tomorrow and we'll make that fight. She will not call tomorrow and that fight will not be made because she does not want to fight Amanda Nunes. My job is to take that. She won't do a 1-fight deal. She will not fight Amanda Nunes. She will not fight Amanda Nunes. Amanda Nunes will knock her out again in the first round. I know it, you know it, and she knows it.
You saw Dana backstage. What did you say to him and what did he say to you?
I look at his eyes and I shake his hand and I say, why you lying? I text you on your phone after the fight. I want my rematch. And after I talked to him, I didn't know he's talking bad things about me before. She's afraid. Man, I'm not afraid. I'm a fighter.
White, in response, explained that he never attempted to bully Cyborg and that whatever issues they had was settled a long time ago.
He did the joke about I look like Vanderlei Silva in the dress. A lot of people go to my Instagram, do this. I suffer in bullying. Where is the code for you cannot have this? He's the boss. Say I'm sorry for everything he's doing for me.
When I saw her at the MMA Awards, she looked like Vanderlei Silva in a dress and heels. And she did. Didn't she not? Who wants to dispute that she didn't look like Vanderlei? She got up and she was like, walking up the stairs, jacked up on steroids, beyond belief, and looked like Vanderlei Silva in a dress and heels.
You believe she's still on steroids?
I don't know.
I suffer bully, abuse. You go in my Instagram, every people call me, I'm a man, I have a dick. Because the joke he's doing. How is the boss make fun? They are athlete. This is not right. I have a daughter. I have mom, I have a dad. My daughter have a problem in school already because this. I think he's bully guy, he's damaged my brand, my self-esteem. He don't change his lie, he's continue doing this, continue bullying me, and who's gonna stop him?
I don't think there's any peace between me and Cyborg. What she did was dirty, what she did with the video and all this other stuff. And then meanwhile, she's running around saying she better get an apology from me. I got an apology from her. It's been a bad experience dealing with Cyborg from day one. We brought her in after she tested positive for steroids. We made her a clean athlete with the best drug testing policy in all of sports the entire time she was here. Her legacy and her brand, nothing's better than knowing that she's a clean athlete after testing positive for steroids and all the negativity that surrounded her about being a dirty athlete. And she was just never happy, complaining about everything. She was a nightmare to deal with. She's unhappy, we're unhappy. She lies and does that thing. See you later. Have a nice life.
If that's what Dana can do to a dominant champion, imagine what he can do to a guy like Caleb Starnes, who kept on running at UFC 83.
Quarry is bringing this fight to Caleb. Caleb was running away from him at one point. This is the best Nate Quarry that I've seen as far as stand-up goes. He looks great. Caleb's kind of running away.
Quarry has Starnes backpedaling big time.
During his middleweight bout against Nate Quarry, Starnes spent most of his time running away from Quarry instead of engaging in the fight, which is what people had come to see.
Very difficult to win a fight by just continuously running away and going backwards. And he keeps backing up. I don't know how you can really get too much offense if you're backing up like that.
Caleb continuously circled off, forcing his opponent to literally run after him.
30 seconds remains of the fight. Oh, wow.
I don't think we need to translate what that meant.
I know exactly what that meant. You want
Quarry
Joe Rogan would have got that.
Quarry!
Wow!
Naturally, Starnes lost the fight by unanimous decision and received heavy criticism for his lack of effort and activity during the match.
And then I just kept chasing him. And at the 10-second bell in the third round, I did my famous rock hammer punch. And so as we're getting to the end of the third, I thought to myself, I can't give you the fight you wanted to see. But even more than that, you want a memory. You want something to talk about in the years to come. That I can give you.
When I first came in, I heard some boos. And I didn't know what to feel like that. I was kind of like, okay. But then as the fight went on, I figured if you can change, I can change, anybody can change!
After the fight, Dana White stated that Starnes didn't belong in the UFC after this horrible performance and suggested he consider a different career to Luis Pena.
Beating on his wife again or whatever.
Second domestic.
God, dude, what's up with this? Is it a mental thing? It's just an unhealthy relationship thing? Is it alcohol abuse? All of the above?
Brain damage mixed with alcohol?
I think there's a lot of domestic abuse, but not even taking brain damage. Just fucking guys don't know how to act or control their emotions.
In June 2021, Pena was arrested in Florida on charges including strong arm robbery, battery, and criminal mischief, following an incident that reportedly occurred on June 14th. By early August 2021, the charges were reduced to misdemeanor charges of simple battery and criminal mischief. However, Pena faced another misdemeanor battery charge related to an incident involving his ex-girlfriend from May 22nd the same year.
This morning, a UFC lightweight fighter, Luis Pena, known as Violent Bob Ross, is behind bars for the second time in 5 months. Pena was arrested on Saturday in Deerfield Beach on charges of battery causing bodily harm and battery domestic violence,
although his former partner chose not to press charges. In October 2021, Pena was arrested again for domestic battery after allegedly striking and biting his girlfriend and also assaulting another woman who tried to intervene.
Luis Pena, UFC fighter, arrested on Friday in Florida for sudden snatching, battery, and criminal mischief.
What is sudden snatching battery? Did he grab somebody's purse?
Well, that's what it sounds like, doesn't it?
Allegedly, they're saying, him and his girlfriend both hit each other, that, he took her phone and threw it down and smashed it, which is a felony down in Florida, they're saying. That even afterwards, when he ran off, after the fight was over between the two of them, where they're both hitting each other, then they're trying to call him and get him to come in, and, he calls his girlfriend, is talking about, I have a gun, I'm going to kill myself. So, it's not even just that he had this domestic violence incident now. You have to start to question what his mental capacity is. Like,
if he has some kind of issues from all the years, getting bashed around in a cage, that this is something that you have to look at, and maybe, his fighting career might have to be put on pause right now to deal with other issues that are bigger than just, making money in the cage.
Or he ends up in jail.
And that was the final nail in his coffin as far as his UFC career was concerned. The UFC fired him.
ESPN reporting the release of Luis Pena after his issues this week. I'm just curious, kind of what led to that decision, and is this maybe an example of things to come? Because I think a lot of people have been wondering, what can the UFC do in situations like this?
Well, this was a bad case, and we knew that he had problems before that we were trying to help him with. Yeah, this is a pretty nasty one. I don't know if you guys read the police report, but yeah, this one had to happen.
The question, comes then, could something like that happen to John Jones as well? I mean, he was obviously details a little bit differently. I don't know that we know everything yet, but I mean, is that a possibility if it turns out the details are as bad?
Something like that could happen to anybody, yeah.
And he'll probably never come back given how bad his recent MMA record is. And the next up is Dennis Homan.
And then we saw some interesting clothing options, I guess. What was your reaction when you saw that? Did you feel like Homan was taking this as a joke? He came out there and was stretching in the octagon. It was kind of weird.
I was horrified. I was disgusted. I was a little more upset with the people that work for me that they would actually think that it was okay for him to walk out with those ridiculous shorts on.
Who set tongues wagging by wearing a skimpy blue speedo for his fight against Brian Ebersol at UFC 133.
Dennis Homan has been there, done that all around the world. And what an unfortunate choice in shorts. That just doesn't look right.
I just want to know why. Those shorts make George St. Pierre's shorts look like capri jeans. I'm a little bit uncomfortable right now.
Yeah, I don't feel good about this at all.
Right, so why did you decide to wear those?
I won't say what the bet was about, but I lost a bet to those guys, and losing the bet meant that I got to wear some Speedos. It turned out to be a bigger deal than I thought it would be because, obviously they're legal shorts. Well, not anymore because Dana doesn't want them to be legal, but...
Did he say anything to you after the fight, Dana?
Yeah, he said those shorts are going to be effing illegal from now on. So.
For the first time ever, I'm giving out a thanks for getting those horrifying shorts off TV as soon as possible bonus. And I'm not joking. Brian Ebersol gets $70,000 too.
Dana was so pissed at Homan that he banned similar outfits from future fights.
Not as bad can get it. Nobody will ever fight in something like that again in the UFC. That I guarantee you.
As a girl, honestly, didn't want to look at it either.
So imagine how guys feel. Okay.
And maybe that was the reason why he later struck a deal with Reebok and Venom to make fighters more presentable.
I was just worried about that cup and worried about his uniform malfunctioning, to be quite honest.
Yeah. I don't even know what that was.
But is that the reason why he got
But he
the
deserved
bonus?
every dime of the $70,000 that he made tonight.
Nevertheless, Homan had one more UFC fight before being released by the promotion and never to be signed again.
As a corner man, how do you seriously say, dude, this might be a bad idea. You might not want to wear these out there.
It's one of those things where the fighters now feel like, I got to make a name for myself. I got to put on a display. I got to make people remember me. And that was his gimmick. Looks like it backfired.
Yeah, that's the last thing you want to be remembered for, is going out there and making people watch 5 minutes of that.
Next on our list is Diego Brandao, who got the boot for his shenanigans outside of the cage.
Tonight, for the first time, we're hearing from the UFC fighter who's accused of roughing up a worker at a downtown Albuquerque club and pulling out a gun.
The veteran UFC featherweight and winner of the Ultimate Fighter 14 was released from his UFC contract following a series of incidents, including his arrest on suspicion of assault at a strip club.
Albuquerque police officers respond to a call at the downtown strip club Knockouts back in April.
They were just holding him back, and I mean, he was going crazy. I'm almost positive he's an MMA fighter.
Witnesses are describing Diego Brandao. Knockouts employees say Brandao was arguing with the DJ and appeared drunk, that he threw punches at the door, then things escalated.
He put the gun to their chest. I told everybody, get inside, get inside.
For which he faced charges including aggravated battery and assault.
We go there all the time, but I feel the guy got a jealous there. He's not supposed to touch me because he's not security.
Were you drinking?
Yes.
Had you been drinking a lot?
No.
Did you have a gun?
No.
It's important that you're honest before you answer.
He's asked again.
But did you have a gun that night?
I do have a gun that night, yeah. I'm afraid to piss off and I drink and I shoot him.
Brandao was arrested.
Before his arrest, Brandao had messed up with a positive marijuana test and had lost his most recent UFC bout, so the UFC cited violations of the UFC fighter conduct policy to kick him out. And moving on, BJ Penn met a similar fate after he caused a scene in the streets in 2019. After losing 7 in a row inside the octagon, BJ Penn went headhunting on the streets of Hawaii in 2019. In a series of videos published by TMZ that year, Penn was observed exchanging punches with a man outside the Lava Shack bar in Pahoa on the Big Island of Hawaii. He managed to land at least 3 punches before bystanders intervened. Another video later depicted Penn being knocked out by the same individual during a street fight, after which the UFC legend was released by the promotion. Now, Dana and the company had been seeking a justification to release him even before the video emerged.
BJ is too tough for his own good. BJ might not be knocked out, but the shots that BJ took would have knocked out a normal human being. He's taken a lot of damage, and I don't want to see him take any more.
And the street fight made it a whole lot easier for the UFC to let the legend go.
We have a deal now, win, lose, or draw. This is BJ Penn's last fight.
How do you ensure that?
Because I won't give him another fight.
Right.
He won't fight here, though. That I guarantee you.
Just take Thiago Silva, for instance. In early 2014, Silva evaded charges in Florida where he faced accusations of brandishing a gun at his estranged wife and threatening to kill her. Initially banned from UFC competition by Dana White, Silva was reinstated after the charges were dropped.
Let's talk a little bit about Thiago Silva. You know, after his domestic violence arrest, you took him back. You originally said he'd never fight in the UFC again. Why'd you take him back?
I said he'd never fight in the UFC again when his SWAT team was around his house and things weren't looking too good for Thiago Silva.
Makes sense. Good point. That's legit.
When the SWAT team is surrounding your house, probably a good chance you're in big trouble. He went through the process and no charges were filed against him, and they let him go. You're innocent until proven guilty, and the guy walks. If there was some type of video or something like that turned up on Thiago, then yeah, it would be a different story.
However, his opportunity ran out after a few months later, after video footage emerged showing him holding a gun and accusing his wife of harboring another man in their home. At one point in the video, his wife was heard stating that she's recording to provide evidence in case Silva did something terrible. The UFC fired Silva in the immediate aftermath of the incident. Another legend that ended his relationship with the UFC on a sour note was the axe murderer Wanderlei Silva. In May 2014, Silva evaded a drug test the NSAC tried to conduct at his Las Vegas gym, which Silva later confessed was because he had taken diuretics. The NSAC slapped the Brazilian with a lifetime ban for his violation, and a few days later he announced his retirement from MMA. In May 2015, however, his ban was overturned, meaning that he was eligible to fight again. However, Silva then criticized UFC fights, likening them to a circus, and declared he would never fight in the promotion again. A few months later, Silva apologized for his remarks, but he was subsequently released by the UFC. No matter what you do, just don't dare touch a referee. That's where Dana White draws the line, and Jason High found it the hard way. After losing to Rafael dos Anjos via second round TKO in 2014, High shoved referee Kevin Mulhall, angered by what he believed were shots to the back of the head delivered by his opponent that led to the stoppage.
Dos Anjos drops him there. Hang in the pocket, he might get the finish here. Jason High is hanging in there somehow, he might be out. Rafael dos Anjos!
As a result, he was fired by the UFC, even though he apologized for his actions on Twitter. Dana White said, and I quote, "That Jason High kid got up and pushed a referee. He's cut. I'm going to cut him. You don't ever effing touch a referee. Ever. You're done here." Maybe High would have gotten away with it if he was a big name, because for guys at the bottom of the barrel, the margins for error are close to zero. But that doesn't mean the UFC doesn't give anybody second chances. Now, nobody has had a fall from grace quite like TJ Dillashaw.
I tested positive for erythropoietin. I was taking an anemia medication called Procrit. Knew I wasn't allowed to take it. Anemia medications, the main ingredient in them are erythropoietin, which everyone knows is EPO. It helps you produce more red blood cells, and red blood cells transport oxygen so you can have more endurance.
The two-time UFC bantamweight champion decided to move down to flyweight and challenge Henry Cejudo to become a champ in 2019.
TJ Dillashaw tested positive for injectable EPO, which is a serious performance-enhancing substance.
Drop into a weight class that my body physically wouldn't let me do. Full-blown anemic, 6-8 weeks out before the fight. Not wanting to wake up, not wanting to train, not feeling like I could live up to the biggest fight of my life, you know? So I took an anemia medication that I knew I couldn't, but I knew that it would get me back to where I was, you know?
TJ was slapped with a 2-year suspension by the USADA for breaching the UFC's anti-doping regulations.
But fuck, man. To test positive for EPO
In the Henry Cejudo fight, they've got these new methods of detection. They can absolutely tell that you injected it. Apparently, they went and tested his old fight piss with Cody too, and that tested positive for EPO as well. And then Cody started freaking out.
The suspension was accompanied by a 1-year ban from the New York State Athletic Commission, which overlapped with his USADA sanction.
EPO, I imagine, man. Yeah, because, man, TJ was saying how good he felt. He never felt so good in his life. I'm just hearing it from him.
TJ looked like dead man walking, going to the weigh-ins. Like TJ had starved himself down to a skeleton. It was real weird. And then when you found out that he was taking EPO, and then he said that he was taking EPO because he just didn't have any energy from cutting that weight.
I felt sick inside when I found out, Joe.
Dillashaw ultimately returned in 2021 and fought twice, beating Corey Sandhagen but losing to Aljamain Sterling, before eventually retiring with a crushed shoulder and a tarnished legacy.
It's a hard one to swallow when you get caught cheating, which is, this stuff is, there's no way it's not cheating. I mean, this is just cheating, right? I mean, this isn't any accident. It taints your legacy.
Come on, Joe Rogan show. And let's see, what could he talk about to make me uncomfortable to talk about? Maybe some hard stoppages. Man, I would talk about some hard stoppages.
And from Ruslan Magomedov had trouble with drug tests multiple times as well, although his violations were far more serious. Magomedov was suspended for the first time in 2016, where he tested positive for a selective androgen receptor modulator intended to enhance muscle growth. His second violation took place in October 2018, and it involved 2 steroid metabolites. The situation worsened in February of the following year, when he declined to provide a sample. As a result, the USADA imposed a lifetime ban on him, effectively ending any possibility of him competing in the UFC again. Now, not all bar fights result in a victory though, and Mikhail Falcao was a perfect example of that. Falcao was 1-0 in the UFC when he was abruptly released by the promotion before his second fight in 2010, after fans bombarded the promotion with messages to sack him. The reason was his legal issues dating back to 2002, when he had allegedly assaulted a woman in a bar. 3 years after his release, Dana confirmed that Falcao was cut due to the organization's zero tolerance policy for his assault on women, which sounds ironic after Dana's slap fighting duel with his wife in 2023.
Incredibly unfortunate timing, I guess, in terms of the launch of a slap league.
There is no good or bad timing for what I did. You know what I mean? There's irony. This is a personal family matter that played out in public. You know, I'm sure a lot of people, whether it be media, fighters, friends, who had respect for me might not have respect for me now. There's no excuses for it. Something that I'm gonna have to deal with and live with for the rest of my life.
Back then, however, White stated that any fighter involved in sexual assault or violence against women would immediately be removed from the roster, regardless of their standing as a winner or a champion. A decade later, in January 2022, Falcao was stabbed to death during a bar fight that unfortunately didn't go his way. Palhares is another UFC fighter who received a 4-year ban for using multiple steroids. The substances detected in his samples included drostanolone, its metabolite, testosterone of exogenous origin, and anastrozole. Since these substances are prohibited at all times by the UFC, the adjudication of Harris's case was conducted by Combat Sports Anti-Doping, the UFC's new anti-doping program, overseen by former FBI agent George Pirro. Harris is the first fighter to be suspended under this new program, which utilizes Drug-Free Sport International for sample collection.
The weird thing, it's called Drug-Free Sports International. They actually do the testing for everybody, like NFL, NBA. They're in control of the testing, right? So they get the test, and then they give the results to this guy named George Pirro, who's a former FBI agent, but he's the one who gets the results, and then he hands out the punishment. But the thing is, like, does that guy work for the UFC?
Sounds like a lot of corruption to me.
You know what I mean? Yeah. Like it's like a lot of, you know,
a bit like the possibility.
There's a lot of like massaging that could be done, right? With like results. I test you, there's this little bit of something. I make that little bit of something big of something. And then pop you're gone. Don't have to pay you nothing, suspend you, get out of here. And then let's say you test positive, but you're our cash cow. Oh, cash cow.
Exactly.
Burn it, whatever. I'm saying that could be something that could happen. I mean, we don't know. You guys know MMA, man. Like, there's so much corruption going on, right?
Well, remember what happened with Brock Lesnar? He tested positive before the fight, and they were just like, "Oh, we'll deal with it after the fight." It's like, what are you talking about?
Harris is currently 40 years old, and he'll be 44 in 2027 when his suspension ends, meaning that he may never fight in the UFC again. Now, Ottman Azatar's antics on UFC Fight Island in 2020 were straight out of a Hollywood thriller. In January 2021, the undefeated lightweight was set to face Matt Frevola at UFC 257. However, on the day of the weigh-ins, he shockingly withdrew from the fight, and it was later revealed that Ottman had violated safety protocols related to COVID.
Ottman Azaitar, we're all excited about seeing him fight. We now know that he's not, and the press release has said that it's a health and safety violation. I'm surprised at that, because how do you do that out here?
It's pretty amazing, actually, yeah. So he and his team cut off their wristbands, gave them to somebody outside the bubble. I don't know how they even did it. That guy taped them, showed up here with a bag, went into a room, shimmied across 4 balconies, went in his room, dropped the bag off, changed his clothes, and then left. Now, when security tried to stop him, he wouldn't stop. Either way, yeah, it's just that. He's gone. He's no longer a UFC fighter, and he's not fighting tonight.
So he's been cut from the UFC off the back of that?
Yep.
Due to this breach, Azaitar was released from the UFC, but then his manager, Ali Abdelaziz, worked his magic and got him reinstated.
What was in the bag?
They can ask, no problem.
Not going to tell us that?
No problem, you can ask. But the thing is, let's say I come in to this room with a bag. Why would you ask me what's in the bag? What's in your bag?
This guy supposedly broke into a bubble to get you said bag. So that's a bit different than if you brought one in here today.
Have you been there in this bubble?
I was in the bubble, yeah.
Did someone check your bag before you went in?
They sprayed it, they didn't check it.
So, my bags also were not checked. No one ever checked my bag, so why this big secret around this bag? If I wanted to sneak anything in, I could have done it without any, like Mission Impossible or sending Spider-Man to give Batman something.
It's a lot of superhero friends that you have.
Yeah, I belong to these guys, you know, Ottman, Batman, Ant-Man.
It's the same
all these guys, same.
Jennifer Gonzalez was the unluckiest of them all. The promising prospect from Chile was set to make history as the first Chilean woman to compete in the UFC at UFC Fight Night 202. However, just a week before her debut, Gonzalez was removed from a fight against Josiane Nunes and released from a UFC contract. The shocking turn of events stemmed from a conflict with the USADA, the UFC's anti-doping partner at the time. During a visit to Gonzalez's gym in Santiago, Chile, Gonzalez explained that USADA required her to provide a detailed schedule of her whereabouts, which she complied with, indicating that she spent most of her time in the gym. However, when USADA officials arrived at her gym, they demanded that she not leave their site, leading to a confrontation when Gonzalez needed to briefly enter a home adjacent to the gym to secure her dogs. The situation escalated, with Gonzalez's partner Pablo Villaseca, who got involved in an argument with the USADA workers. And that was that. Next on our list is MMA fighter turned pro wrestling superstar Matt Riddle.
Bro.
Who started out in the UFC under Dana White's leadership. Riddle built up an impressive record but ran into trouble when he tested positive for marijuana, not once, but twice.
Now the reason he's not in the UFC anymore is because he could not pass a drug test. And think about this, you have to go to work 3 times a year, and you couldn't pass a drug test? You're so weak-minded and so addicted to marijuana that you couldn't stay off it enough to pass a drug test 3 times a year. Well, guess what, dummy? They drug test in the real world too. And I want to know where this rocket scientist is going to go and make $100,000 a year. And also, this is the guy, Matt Riddle, who did an interview and said, I smoke marijuana so I don't beat my wife and children.
Oh my.
Oh my.
The first time was after UFC 149, where Riddle's victory against Chris Clements was overturned because he failed his post-fight drug test, whereas in February 2013, his win over Che Mills suffered the same fate when he tested positive for marijuana again, resulting in another wellness policy violation. With this being Riddle's second drug test failure in less than a year, the company made the decision to release him.
You know, I'm not the biggest fan of Mr. White, you know. I don't think he has good business ethics. He is an asshole. He was really cold-blooded towards me. If you knew one of your employees had their 3rd child and was still doing good work but failed a drug test again, like, maybe he needs help, you know, like, maybe we can go another route with this, right? I don't think he does things properly. I don't think he treats people properly. I just don't think he's a good person.
You leaving UFC felt like, from the outside looking in, feels really stupid.
And like, even when I was with the UFC and I got fired for failing a drug test, marijuana 2 times, and I had a medical license and everything. Now you fast forward, it's off the banned substance list. Back then TRT was allowed. Then I go, hey, you're allowing fighters to use steroids and painkillers prescribed by doctors, but you're not allowing like me to use medical marijuana because it's a performance enhancing drug and I'm super dangerous. Dana White put me on blast and called me a loser and this, that. Go make 6 figures somewhere else smoking weed. I'm doing that easily, and I've been doing it for like a decade now.
Bro.
Junie Browning was banned from the UFC for sinister reasons.
Is your life going a little too good? Are you headed straight to the top? That shit.
The Lunatic was an extremely controversial fighter who rose to fame due to his antics on The Ultimate Fighter.
I've developed a surefire system to self-sabotage your career and your life on 5 simple discs. Disc 1, how to throw bottles at people.
Glasses at people in real life, you're going to jail. It's assault and battery.
Disc 2, how to develop a bipolar disorder within minutes.
What the is wrong with you? I can't figure out if you're retarded, bipolar, or if you're one of these dudes that is afraid of failing.
Disc 3, how to pick fights with people 3 times your size.
He wants me to kick him off the show. It's the easy way out. He's afraid to lose on national television, and what he can do is he can go home and say, I'd have won that show. This ain't Survivor and vote him off. Beat him off. That didn't sound good, did it?
Disc number 4, how to completely piss off your boss while flushing your career down the toilet.
This guy should have been kicked off the show a long time ago. This kid's a nut job. He is a Fruit Loop.
Disc number 5, mother all at the same time.
But his UFC stint didn't last very long. In 2009, Browning was arrested in Nevada for assaulting 3 nurses while being treated for a drug overdose. The former TUF contestant allegedly pushed, punched, and kicked the nurses and made serious threats. The UFC immediately banned him following the incident.
I'm truly sorry for what happened, and if I could take it back, I definitely would. I don't have any excuses. I have a lot of problems, and I'm working on them. That's just about all I can really say. I just want to thank the UFC for giving me the opportunity I had. It was a really bad image I put on not just them, but MMA in general.
After which Browning went to Thailand and had a run-in with the Thai mafia, almost getting killed due to his shenanigans. Fortunately, he managed to survive and return to the United States. He now keeps a low profile. Cody East's troubled past also led to his sacking from the world's top MMA promotion.
The former local UFC fighter is waking up behind bars after an arrest on domestic violence charges, and Cody East could make his first court appearance as early as today.
In 2016, the UFC went ahead with their plan to sign East despite being well aware of his domestic violence history. The heavyweight competed twice under the promotion's banner, losing both fights, and that's when the UFC brass decided that the juice was no longer worth the squeeze and released him, which proved to be a good decision because years later, East would again get arrested on a domestic violence charge.
East is back behind bars after a domestic violence incident over the weekend. According to a criminal complaint, East got into a fight with his wife and is accused of refusing to let her and their kids out of a car. The woman told deputies he made threatening comments and pushed her when she tried to stop him. He's charged with child abuse, false imprisonment, and battery. East has faced similar charges in the past.
In a 2015 interview with our own Jared Chester, East insisted that past was behind him.
I just got kind of in this bad lifestyle. But you know, that was when I was 18. I'm 26 now. I made some mistakes. I grown from it, and I'm a better man because of it.
Some people are just straight dirtbags, and Hermes Franca is one of them.
UFC fighter has been arrested on sexual abuse charges.
The former UFC lightweight contender was released from his UFC contract in 2008 due to a series of legal and doping issues. Franca had earned a title shot against Sean Shirk at UFC 73 in July 2007, but lost by unanimous decision. Both Franca and Shirk tested positive for anabolic steroids after the fight, with Franca admitting guilt and receiving a 12-month suspension from the California State Athletic Commission. Franca requested to be released from his UFC contract to compete outside the organization during his suspension, and he was never brought back, especially after he sexually assaulted a minor in 2012 and was slapped a 3-year prison sentence for the crime.
He faces 7 counts of sexual abuse in Clackamas County, but authorities aren't releasing any more details on this. Franca lives in Florida, but turned himself in Clackamas County, where he used to run a martial arts academy.
Latest guy to get the boot from the UFC is Igor Severino, who took chewing his opponent and spitting him out literally. The Dana White Contender Series graduate made his UFC debut against Andre Lima in March 2024, where the fight was going pretty well until the debutant channeled his inner Mike Tyson.
He has been a legendary boxer, and I'm certain he's inspired generations to punch above their weight, like he did, to rise to the top, to fight like him, to defend like him, and maybe even bite like him.
And viciously bit his opponent.
Severino landed 5 takedowns in his Contender Series.
Time, you gotta touch him, ref.
Did he bite him?
No way.
Lima signaled to the referee to stop the fight and displayed the bite mark on his left arm. After reviewing the footage, officials decided to disqualify Severino.
Is the review official who just mouthed the words to me, said bite. That's what they're reviewing right now.
Teeth marks there.
Oh.
Did he get flesh?
Fight is over.
Wow, straight fight over.
Thank you.
He's going with a DQ.
Okay, you
Beyond
bit him. Yes, you did.
intentional
Yes,
to.
you did.
Oh, I remember back.
Oh, jeez.
Oh,
okay, yeah, my
come on.
God.
See that.
Oh, look at that.
But
It's
that
bleeding.
is
That's
a bit
really
different.
bad.
And they did
Do
now
that with
seeing
his
that.
mouth guard.
I don't fault Chris
No, not at all.
for that stopping.
Wow.
And Dana White went a step further by firing him.
If you get frustrated and want out of the fight, there are plenty of ways to do it. But the worst thing you can do is bite your opponent. Now you get cut and lose the biggest opportunity of your life. Not to mention, he's going to have real problems with the NSAC.
Lima later got a tattoo of the bite mark and even got a $50,000 bonus from the boss in response to the incident. So another fighter whose UFC career ended due to a doping suspension was none other than former heavyweight champion Frank Mir. The UFC legend was banned from the promotion after receiving a 2-year suspension from USADA due to multiple violations of the UFC anti-doping policy.
Frank Mir was sanctioned for a determined period of time.
He was 2 years. Frank Mir, he had every right to go to arbitration, but on his own offense, didn't do that.
The violation stemmed from his positive test for a long-term metabolite.
Frank Mir tested positive. Was it also oral
Also,
turinabol?
same thing, long-term metabolite of oral turinabol. Frank Mir, the same as John Jones, his first time through, was sanctioned.
During an in-competition test on March 20th, the day of his heavyweight bout against Mark Hunt. Additionally, a previously reported negative test from February 2016 was reanalyzed and found to be positive for the same prohibited substance, dihydrochloromethyltestosterone, or DHCMT. As a result, Mir's suspension began retroactively on April 8th, 2016, the date he was provisionally suspended by USADA, and this ran through April 2018.
Are you going to appeal this?
I've been trying to fight it just to figure out what happened and what was going on, but now to appeal it because of the latest testing saying that it can go back for years, where do I even begin?
Right.
I've already spent a lot of money just on an 8-week period of my life. Now they're telling me it can be 2 or 3 years of my life with different supplements that could have been tainted.
Like, how do you track that, right?
How do you even begin? I don't even know. So, I want to find out the truth, but now I'm looking at it seems like a pretty insurmountable hill.
The UFC seems to be a lot more tolerant these days about what a fighter tweets or says on the mic, because as Dana White recently said, he doesn't like to control his fighters.
Free speech. Control what people say. Gonna tell people what to believe. Gonna tell people. I don't tell any other human being what to say. Free speech. Brother, people can say whatever they want and they can believe whatever they want.
But a decade ago, this wasn't the case when the UFC fired Miguel Torres due to a controversial tweet he posted.
Miguel Torres, a UFC bantamweight, was just released due to a tweet that you deemed offensive about rape. Why?
I thought this was offensive. I thought it was absolutely ridiculous and stupid. I'm sitting in this very room this morning being interviewed by Landsberg, and he reads me Miguel Torres's tweet, okay, which is rape vans. If they were called surprise vans, more women would get into them because everybody loves a surprise. I was blown away. It's one of the first times in an interview that I didn't know what to say.
In the tweet, Torres made a joke about rape, saying if a rape van was called a surprise van, more women wouldn't mind going for rides in them. Everyone likes surprises. The tweet naturally sparked outrage, leading UFC President Dana White to immediately cut Torres from the roster.
After the press conference, I find out that that was the case. He did say that, and he was joking. It was just a joke. It's not a funny joke to me. It's just not something you tweet.
Then someone reported this back to you and you made the decision then to let him go.
Correct. If that's your sense of humor, keep it at home around you and your buddies and keep it to yourself. And what Miguel Torres wrote is unacceptable. It's unacceptable. Yeah, no business talking about rape on Twitter. It's not funny. It's not entertaining. It's not something that people think is funny and want to read about.
Is this the first time since you've been running the UFC that someone has been fired due to something they've said or written?
Probably, yeah. I think so. There's limits. There's limits to what you can say and what you can't say. And Miguel Torres definitely crossed the line. Unless you want to stop fighting and go become a comedian and open up for Rogan or something, we don't want to hear your jokes. We don't want to hear what you think is funny.
And needless to say, it was well deserved, because there are some boundaries you just cannot cross.
It's not about the mistake that you make, it's how you handle yourself after you make that mistake. And there's some guys in this sport who deny, lie, say they didn't do this, they didn't do that, there's a conspiracy going on. He didn't do any of that. He went and handled himself like a man, and I respect that. We got together today, he talked to me, and he's back in the UFC. So, and here's the thing too. Now, I was criticized for cutting him. Now I'll be criticized for bringing him back. The bottom line is I don't give a shit what anybody thinks. or what anybody says. I don't give a fuck what your opinion is. I'm gonna do this the way that I do it. You don't go on Twitter and you don't make rape jokes. You can all have your opinions. Your opinions don't mean me. I'm gonna run this thing the way that I want to, and I'm gonna do things the way that I think it should be done. I know when I cut Miguel Torres that I did the right thing, and I know I did the right thing today by bringing him back.
So 2008, John Koppenhaver, commonly known as War Machine, was let go from the UFC after declining a fight offer from UFC matchmaker Joe Silva and making controversial comments regarding the death of fellow UFC fighter Evan Tanner, who died due to heat exhaustion while on a solo trip to the rural desert of Palo Verde. On his MySpace page, War Machine speculated that Tanner had gone to the isolated Southern California desert to take his own life after realizing his career might have been over and he had not made much money from it. Despite medical examiners later determining that Tanner's death was not a suicide, War Machine stood by his remarks. Needless to say, War Machine was fired by the UFC for causing unnecessary controversy. Years later, the controversial MMA fighter was handed life imprisonment for raping and assaulting his estranged girlfriend.
Kid got charged with 29 felonies. He's the one that beat up the porn star, you know.
They call him the War
Machine.
War Machine. She got beat up, bro. You see those pictures?
Bro, he broke her teeth and shit. I mean, 29 felonies. Jesus Christ.
The Stockton native was banned from the UFC after testing positive for marijuana following his fight with Anderson Silva at UFC 183 in January 2015. The Nevada State Athletic Commission imposed a 5-year ban on Diaz and fined him $165,000.
How are you feeling right now?
I'm pretty pissed off. This commission, they've done everything they can to keep me from being all the way on top. So I've already beat guys who are on the top right now that people don't understand that I'm the best fighter in the world. They don't understand that. I wanted to, just get up and tell them all, like, look, you guys are way the fuck out of line. You guys have been trying to hold me down from day one. I'm the biggest draw. I'm the best fighter. They deprived me of not just money now, but the right to stand up for my little brother. I'm like, y'all can get knocked the fuck out.
However, Diaz later appealed the decision and managed to reduce the ban to 18 months. Despite the reduction in suspension, he remained ineligible to compete due to his inability to pay the hefty fine.
I think that punishment was cruel, and people know that. I don't think that they should be testing for weed at all. It has nothing to do with sports, and they keep saying like, oh, it's for the safety of the fighter to make sure the fighter doesn't go out there high and get injured. And like, really? Then why aren't you testing us to make sure we're not drunk? You should test for performance-enhancing drugs only.
I thought it was horrible. And sometimes they break down some of the other things that guys have done, and then you compare it to what Nick has done. And I understand that Nick is a repeat offender, but there's no reason to, come on, 5 years. I think that was above and beyond. He is who he is, man. And that's why we all love him. Like, fighters love Nick Diaz. Like, we all love him because he lives his own, he is who he is. I think it's wrong, 100%. I think it's 100% wrong, and I hope it gets overturned.
I think it's ridiculous that he's getting punished more than somebody who's using, testosterone or EPO. It's like it's not even in the same ball. I hope that they, overturn his suspension. And
obviously, I think it's ridiculous that he's out for 5 years. I mean, that's pretty much life at this stage in his career.
After reaching an agreement with the NSAC, Diaz made his long-awaited return. Diaz quit midway through, and he'll probably never fight again. Francisco Rivera ended up paying a hefty price for trying to outfox USADA. Rivera tested positive for clenbuterol in July 2016, and initially faced a standard 2-year suspension. However, after opting for arbitration, he attempted to prove contamination from tainted meat consumed during a trip to Tijuana, Mexico, submitting bank and witness statements as evidence. When USADA raised doubts about the authenticity of the evidence, Rivera failed to prove original records and admitted to fabricating evidence. As a result, Rivera was handed an additional 2-year suspension, as well as a boot by the UFC. Now, faking documents is one thing, but faking your entire MMA record is a whole other level of shithousery. And that is exactly what Askar Mozarov did to enter the UFC.
Can we ask about your record? It's been in the news this week that your wins and losses have changed and your record. Do you have any comment on all that situation?
A lot of the fights that I had were in China, and the organizations, they don't add fights after, so you have to really pursue it to make sure that they add the fights that you have. This is actually a situation that for the last 7-8 years, no one mentioned anything, no one said anything. Now when I get up to the biggest promotion, I'm in the UFC, I guess someone or one of the admins wants to prove himself or show himself. It's a little bit weird, right? I wasn't even fighting MMA, and I took some semi-pro fights, and I didn't know that they were going to be counted towards the record, and that was under my name before. Now when I had a stepfather, changed my first name, changed my last name, so there was a little bit of a mix-up with that.
Mozarov joined the UFC in 2022 with a record of 25 wins and 7 losses, which was pretty impressive until Sherdog, an MMA database, dug deep into the Ukrainian's career and found a rabbit hole of lies and deceit.
I mean, all week this guy's record went
right, fluctuating, right?
Fluctuating.
Damn stock market. When it got to the point when I talked to y'all yesterday, and I noticed it was 3 times. I was like, man, this guy's a weirdo. He's a chump.
Sherdog executives found out that Mozarov had discarded almost half a dozen losses by using different names as well as nationalities.
He decided to try and just change his name and start fighting under a new identity with a blank record. Artur Shadakov would eventually opt for a full rebrand and legally changed his name to Askar Mazharov.
In case you were listening, Askar, you gotta understand, there's nothing personal about any of this. The only thing that might have been personal is when you, the individual fighter, decided to contact a staff member privately on Facebook. Once the fighter breached every protocol and went about it this way, the investigation that followed was a standard investigation that would happen for anybody's record that's in dispute, period, the end. Started working his way up, taking fights against fighters that had never fought before, and building a record that on paper, you're like, oh, okay, all right, he's won 7 in a row with 6 first-round knockouts. That's not bad. It was almost a sculpted type of approach that he went to build this record, to build this profile. So around 2017, he changed his name to Askar Mozarov and then reached out separately to other staff members, essentially saying, hi, I'm Askar Mozarov. Here's my profile. I noticed that there's some guy named Artur Shadakov that's registered in my profile. Can you get those losses off of there? Very, that essentially that kind of situation.
Before his UFC debut, Mozarov's record fell to 19 wins and 12 losses, and when he lost to Alonzo Menefield, it fell to 19 and 13.
For full disclosure, the UFC reached out to me personally when this was going on to ask me about the situation. And granted, they didn't speak about it on the broadcast. I understand why. They look foolish.
Right,
you know, if they brought him in like that. I get it.
So the UFC allowed him to compete despite the controversy, and he was fired immediately after his loss. His Sherdog record now stands at 15 wins and 14 losses, meaning that more discrepancies were found in it.
When I'm laughing at you. I'm laughing at your stupidity. And I'm laughing at your foolishness because, come on, bro. It was dumb. And Askar Mozarov seems like the type of guy that would YouTube himself and find this podcast and listen to us talking about it.
Derek Minner and James Krause, who put the promotion in a bad light with the biggest betting scandal in MMA history.
It is what it is. There's an investigation going on, and see how it plays out. Somebody's saying, well, what's the UFC going to do? We let these guys know not to bet on fights. Do you know what the outcome of this is? If I penalize them, you get cut. They're going to go to fucking federal prison. Federal fucking prison. If you're that fucking stupid and somebody else wants to do it, knock yourself out. There's an investigation going on a fight that's being fixed. There's not enough money in it to ruin your life and not go to jail. Go to federal prison.
In 2022, the UFC found itself embroiled in a significant controversy over suspicious betting activity surrounding a fight between Shailan Nurdenbeki and Derek Minner.
Covering this story the night of a UFC fight at the Apex. Some crazy line movement in the Shailan Nurdenbeki versus Derek Minner fight over the last 90 minutes. Average odds have moved from -237 to -362 for Shailan.
Nurdenbeki is hanging around -200 all week, and then it just falls off a cliff leading up to the fight. As you can see the dates, it falls off a cliff. Same thing with Derek Minner. His line at the very end just skyrockets as we're going into it. One of the most suspicious one is Nurdenbeki, the win by KO TKO, just plummets as the fight is coming. A guy that had 0 UFC finishes prior to this.
All that, line movement that suggested that people were betting on a first round finish, right, for Nurdenbeki, they all knew something.
Former UFC fighter turned coach James Krause, who was in Minner's corner during the bout, remained at the center of the scrutiny after openly discussing his betting habits on MMA fights.
James Krause, as you may know, longtime MMA fighter, veteran, well-respected fighter, became a well-respected coach as well.
James Krause now has a Discord. He's giving out picks. It looks like he's got about 1,000 members now. He's charging $50 a month.
It's called the 1% Club. And we see here, this is as of Friday, April 8th, 2022.
I have a Discord, like 2,000 members in it. We crushed it. Last week, we destroyed it. I take over people's accounts and play for them. I do pretty well at it. I make more money gambling on MMA than I do anything else.
Dana White immediately dismissed Krause and the fighters involved with him as investigations ensued.
Mark, I want to hammer home the fact that no Krause fighters are allowed to compete in the UFC.
Any fighter who is being coached or involved with Krause in any way, trains at Glory, is being advised by the UFC disassociate with James Krause until these investigations are up.
Krause's alleged ties to offshore online sportsbooks further compounded the situation, and as a result, regulatory bodies in various provinces temporarily banned UFC betting amidst concerns of insider betting and suspicious line movements.
Now there are multiple investigations, this whole situation with James Krause, like you said, suspended in Nevada. New Jersey is not taking any bets on James Krause related fights. Ontario, the province in Canada, has banned betting on the UFC pending these investigations. And Alberta, you can't bet on UFC fights in Ontario and Alberta now in Canada, which is pretty huge for, a major sport to have these things happen.
The UFC has since advised Krause and the respective managers working with impacted fighters that effective immediately, fighters who choose to continue to be coached by Krause or who continue to train in his gym will not be permitted to participate in UFC events pending the outcome of the aforementioned government investigations. Further, the UFC has released Darrick Minner from the organization. He's out. He's banned.
The UFC, however, took steps to address the issue by partnering with US Integrity to monitor betting activity.
The UFC's betting integrity partner, Don Best Sports, puts out a statement that they are conducting a thorough review following the Minner Nurdenbecky bout on November 5th,
leading to the reinstatement of UFC betting in certain provinces after concerns were addressed.
The problem is, has the damage been done? Did he shine a light on an issue within the sport that now, with investigations unfolding, and I'm told on the radar of the FBI, do they start pulling on threads that lead to other things? That's where this gets even more dangerous.
These were the guys banned and suspended by the UFC. If you liked the video, please subscribe to our channel and turn on those notifications. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.